The massive space station Kepler-7 floated silently in the darkness between three distant stars. Its metal walls stretched for kilometers in every direction. Bright lights shone from thousands of windows where beings from across the galaxy lived and worked together. This was home to the most important school in known space, the Galactic Xenobiology Institute. Inside one of the larger classrooms, 43 students from 12 different worlds sat waiting. The room itself was a marvel of engineering. The ceiling could change colors to match the light preferences of any species. The air had 3 different breathing zones. Some students sat in chairs while others floated in special chambers filled with their home atmosphere. Near the back of the room sat 2 humans who looked very different from each other. Kira appeared to be in her mid-20s with short black hair and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She wore the simple gray uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. Her hands rested calmly on her desk and she watched the other students with quiet interest. 3 seats away from her sat June, another human who could not seem to sit still. His fingers tapped nervously on his desk. His eyes kept moving between the door and the other students. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the room. Every few minutes he would glance at Kira with an expression that looked almost like worry. The other students represented the diversity of galactic civilization. There was HFY, a tall being covered in blue scales whose people came from a water world. Next to him sat Mortal, whose rocky skin looked like living stone. 2 Zephyrians floated in their breathing chambers, their translucent bodies glowing softly purple. Near the front of the room, 3 Kepler natives used their 4 arms to take notes on multiple devices at once. All of these beings had one thing in common. They kept stealing glances at the 2 humans in their class. Some looked curious. Others appeared nervous. A few seemed almost afraid. The classroom door opened with a soft hiss. Professor Veltar entered the room with smooth flowing steps. He stood nearly 3 meters tall and his entire body appeared to be made of living crystal. Light passed through him in strange patterns that changed color based on his mood. Right now the colors were calm blues and greens. Professor Veltar had taught at the Institute for over 200 Earth years. He was respected throughout the galaxy for his work in studying dangerous species. His research had saved countless lives by helping different worlds understand threats before they became problems. He moved to the front of the room and activated the holographic display system. The lights dimmed and a 3-dimensional image appeared in the center of the classroom. It showed the title of today's lesson in 12 different languages, Identifying and Neutralizing Human Threats, a Survival Guide. A ripple of movement went through the classroom. Several students sat up straighter. Others leaned forward with interest. The 2 Zephyrians in their floating chambers began to glow brighter, which was their species' way of showing excitement or fear. June shifted in his seat again and wiped his palms on his pants. His breathing had become slightly faster. Kira, however, remained perfectly still. Her expression did not change at all. She simply continued to watch Professor Veltar with the same calm attention she had shown since entering the room. "Welcome, students," Professor Veltar said. His voice was like music with harmonic overtones that made his words pleasant to hear. "Today we begin what may be the most important lesson of your academic careers, the study of human behavioral patterns and threat assessment." The holographic display changed to show star maps marking human space. Red zones indicated areas where humans had been involved in conflicts. Yellow zones showed regions where human activity had caused diplomatic incidents. Green zones marked places where humans had formed successful partnerships with other species. Humans, Professor Veltar continued, are perhaps the most unpredictable species we have encountered in our exploration of the galaxy. They have been our friends and our enemies. They have saved entire civilizations and they have destroyed others. Understanding them is crucial for anyone who wishes to work in galactic affairs. The display shifted again to show images of humans in various situations. There were pictures of human diplomats shaking hands or tentacles with alien leaders. There were images of human scientists working alongside beings from other worlds. But there were also darker images, humans in combat armor, humans with weapons, humans with expressions of anger or determination that looked almost frightening. HFY raised one of his scaled arms. "Professor, why are humans considered so dangerous? They seem physically weak compared to many species." Professor Veltar's crystal body flickered with yellow light, indicating he was pleased by the question. "An excellent observation, HFY. Humans are indeed physically unremarkable by galactic standards. They cannot survive in space without protection like the Void Walkers. They are not as strong as the Stone People. They do not have natural weapons like the Razor clans. The holographic display now showed comparison charts between humans and other species. In terms of raw physical capabilities, humans ranked in the bottom third of known intelligent life. However, Professor Veltar continued, and his crystal body began to show streaks of red light. Physical strength is not what makes humans dangerous. What makes them a threat is here. He pointed to his own head, and the display showed cross-sections of human brains compared to other species. Human minds are incredibly adaptable. They can learn to use any technology. They can master any language. They can understand and exploit the weaknesses of any species they encounter. More importantly, they have something that makes them uniquely dangerous in the galaxy. The professor paused and looked around the room. Every student was now paying complete attention. Even Kira seemed to lean forward slightly, though her expression remained neutral. They have imagination. The words seemed to hang in the air. Several students looked confused. Mortal, the stone-skinned being, raised his rocky hand. I do not understand, Professor. Many species have imagination. The dreamers of Altair create beautiful art. The song people tell stories that last for days. Professor Veltar's body flashed with orange light, amusement mixed with concern. Yes, but human imagination is different. Other species imagine to create beauty or preserve history. Humans imagine to solve problems. More specifically, they imagine how to hurt things. The display changed once more. Now it showed human weapons throughout their history. Stone tools and spears from their primitive days. Swords and guns from their industrial period. Energy weapons and combat ships from their spacefaring era. Every single one of these weapons started as an idea in a human mind. A human looked at their world and thought, how can I use this to protect myself or defeat my enemies? They turned rocks into hammers. They turned hammers into weapons. They turned plants into poisons. They turned the power of the atom into the most destructive force their world had ever seen. The images became more disturbing. Scenes of human battlefields. Pictures of destroyed cities. Videos of humans fighting with the intensity that seemed almost inhuman. This is what you must understand about humans, Professor Veltar said, his crystal body now pulsing with steady red light. They do not just fight. They do not just defend themselves. They innovate warfare. They find new ways to win. They turn everything around them into a potential weapon or advantage. June was now visibly sweating. His hands gripped the edges of his desk so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He kept glancing at Kira, but she continued to sit calmly. Her breathing remained steady, and her posture had not changed since the beginning of class. Tomorrow we will discuss human pack behavior and their terrifying ability to coordinate without verbal communication, Professor Veltar announced. We will examine case studies of human tactical thinking and their capacity for both mercy and ruthless efficiency. You will learn to recognize the warning signs that indicate when a human has decided you are a threat. The holographic display faded, and the normal classroom lights returned. Professor Veltar's crystal body returned to calm blue and green hues. That concludes today's introduction. Please review the assigned readings on human psychology and historical conflict patterns. Remember, the goal of this course is not to teach you to fear humans, but to understand them well enough to survive an encounter with a hostile one. As students began to pack their belongings and file out of the classroom, conversations broke out in multiple languages. The tone was serious and many voices carried notes of concern or fear. Several students looked once more at Kira and June before leaving. June remained seated, staring at his hands. Kira finally moved for the first time in over an hour. She gathered her simple note-taking materials and stood up. As she walked past June, she paused. "Are you coming to lunch?" she asked in Korean, her voice quiet and gentle. June looked up at her, and for a moment his expression showed something that might have been relief. "Yes," he replied in the same language. "I need to eat something. My stomach feels like it's trying to eat itself." They left the classroom together, two humans walking among beings who had just spent an hour learning why their species was considered one of the most dangerous in the galaxy. The next morning brought another session of Professor Veltar's Human Threat Assessment course. The same 43 students filled the specialized classroom, but today the atmosphere felt different. More tense, more aware. Several students had positioned themselves further away from the two humans than they had the day before. Kira entered the room exactly 3 minutes before the scheduled start time, just as she had the previous day. She wore the same gray diplomatic uniform and carried the same simple notebook. Her movements were fluid and purposeful as she made her way to her usual seat in the back row. Once again, she settled into perfect stillness. June arrived 30 seconds later, slightly out of breath as if he had been rushing. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he had not slept well. He fumbled with his bag before taking his seat, dropping his stylus twice in the process. When he finally sat down, his hands were already trembling slightly. Professor Veltar entered precisely on time. His crystal body showed deeper blue hues today, indicating serious concentration. The holographic display system activated immediately, filling the center of the room with three-dimensional images. Yesterday we discussed the basic nature of human threats, Professor Veltar began. Today we will examine their most dangerous characteristic, their pack behavior and silent coordination abilities. The display showed footage of human military units moving through various terrains. The students watched as groups of armed humans advanced through forests, urban environments, and even hostile alien landscapes. What made the footage particularly unsettling was how the humans seemed to move as one organism, despite being separate individuals. "Observe carefully," Professor Veltar said, his crystal body now pulsing with orange warning lights. "Notice how they coordinate without speaking. Watch their hand signals, their eye movements, the way they position themselves in relation to each other." The footage slowed down to show the subtle communications between human soldiers. A slight nod from one caused 3 others to change direction. A raised fist brought an entire squad to a silent halt. A series of finger movements sent individuals scattering to specific positions with perfect precision. Vex High, the blue-scaled student, raised his arm again. "Professor, many species have nonverbal communication. My people use color patterns on our scales. The song people communicate through harmonic frequencies." "True," Professor Veltar replied, "but your species developed those communication methods over millions of years of evolution. They are biological adaptations. Humans developed their silent coordination through pure cultural learning. They can teach these skills to any human in a matter of weeks." The display changed to show human children playing games. Even in these innocent activities, the students could see early forms of the same coordination. Children moving together, making plans with quick glances, working as teams without adult supervision. This ability extends beyond military applications, Professor Veltar continued. Humans use these same skills in their daily lives. In their workplaces, their social groups, even their families. They are always assessing, always coordinating, always planning. Mordell, the stone-skinned student, shifted uncomfortably in his reinforced chair. "Are you saying that all human interaction is essentially preparation for conflict?" The professor's crystal body flickered between orange and red as he considered the question. "Not preparation for conflict exactly, but preparation for cooperation under stress. The difference is subtle but important. Humans assume that any group they join might eventually face a crisis that requires instant, wordless coordination." New footage appeared showing human emergency responders working at disaster sites. Firefighters, medical teams, and rescue workers moved with the same fluid coordination as the military units, but their purpose was to save lives rather than take them. "This presents a significant challenge for other species," Professor Veltar explained. "When humans enter a mixed group, they unconsciously begin assessing everyone around them. They identify potential allies, potential threats, possible escape routes, available resources, and tactical advantages. They do this automatically without conscious thought." Several students turned to look at Kira and June. Kira remained perfectly still, her gaze fixed on Professor Veltar. Her breathing was steady and her hands rested calmly on her desk. She might have been sleeping with her eyes open except for the slight movement of her pupils as she tracked the holographic displays. June, by contrast, was clearly struggling. Beads of sweat had formed on his forehead despite the cool classroom temperature. His eyes darted around the room, especially when other students looked in his direction. He kept shifting his weight and adjusting his position as if he could not get comfortable. The next element of human behavior we must discuss is their emotional volatility, Professor Veltar said. The holographic display now showed human faces expressing various emotions: joy, anger, fear, determination, sadness, rage. Humans experience emotions with an intensity that most species find disturbing. More importantly, they can switch between emotional states with remarkable speed. A human can appear calm and friendly one moment, then become violently aggressive the next. The display showed security footage from various diplomatic incidents. Humans who had been smiling and shaking hands with alien dignitaries suddenly became hostile when negotiations broke down. The transformation was swift and dramatic. Notice the physical changes, Professor Veltar pointed out. The muscle tension, the change in posture, the way their facial expressions alter completely. These are warning signs that every being should learn to recognize. One of the Zephyrians in their floating chamber pulsed with yellow light, indicating a question. Their voice came through the translation system as a series of musical tones. How do we distinguish between genuine human emotion and tactical deception? Professor Veltar's entire body flashed bright orange. An excellent question, and one that has puzzled xenobiologists for decades. The truth is that humans themselves often cannot distinguish between genuine emotion and tactical thinking. Their emotions and their strategy become intertwined in ways that make them unpredictable even to other humans. The holographic display now showed brain scans of humans in various emotional states. The patterns of neural activity were complex and constantly shifting. Human brains process emotional and logical information simultaneously. They can feel genuine anger while also calculating the tactical advantages of expressing that anger. They can experience real fear while simultaneously planning how to overcome the source of their fear. June made a small sound, almost like a whimper. Several students turned to look at him. His face had gone pale and his hands were now gripping the edge of his desk so tightly that his knuckles were white. Kira turned slightly in her seat to glance at him. For just a moment, her perfectly neutral expression showed something that might have been concern. She leaned toward him slightly and whispered something in Korean, too quietly for the universal translators to pick up. Whatever she said seemed to help. June's breathing became more regular and some of the tension left his shoulders. But he continued to look deeply uncomfortable as Professor Veltar resumed his lecture. The final topic for today is human adaptability, Professor Veltar announced. This may be their most dangerous trait of all. New images filled the holographic display. Humans living in environments that should have been impossible for their species to survive. Humans in Arctic conditions, desert wastelands, underwater colonies, zero-gravity stations, and even the surface of toxic worlds. Humans can adapt to almost any environment within a single generation. They use technology, but they also physically and mentally adjust to new conditions with remarkable speed. A human who has never seen snow can learn to survive in Arctic conditions within weeks. A human from a peaceful agricultural world can become an effective warrior in a matter of months. The display showed time-lapse videos of human adaptation, humans learning new languages, mastering alien technologies, adjusting to different gravity conditions, even modifying their own biology through genetic therapy to better suit hostile environments. This adaptability extends to social situations as well, Professor Veltar continued. Humans can integrate into almost any society given enough time. They study local customs, learn behavioral patterns, and modify their own behavior to fit in. They become mirrors of whatever environment they find themselves in. The holographic images now showed humans working alongside various alien species. In each case, the humans had somehow adjusted their behavior to match their alien colleagues. With aggressive species, they became more assertive. With peaceful species, they became more gentle. With logical species, they became more analytical. This makes them excellent diplomats and traders, Professor Veltar said, but it also makes them potentially dangerous infiltrators. A human can spend years earning your trust while secretly gathering information or pursuing hidden objectives. The classroom fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. Several students looked nervously at Kira and June again. This time, even more of them seemed to be studying the two humans with new suspicion. Kira appeared completely unaffected by the scrutiny. She continued to sit with perfect composure, occasionally making brief notes in her simple notebook. The third day of Professor Veltar's course brought with it a palpable shift in the classroom atmosphere. Word had spread throughout the station about the human threat assessment class. More students had requested permission to audit the sessions, and the classroom now held 57 beings instead of the original 43. Additional seating had been arranged to accommodate observers from the faculty. 3 senior professors from different departments sat in the back corners, their various forms of note-taking, equipment humming quietly. Dr. Catherine, from the Military Strategy Department, had even brought her specialized recording crystal to capture every detail of the proceedings. Kira entered the room at her usual time, 3 minutes before the official start. She showed no reaction to the increased attendance or the additional scrutiny. Her gray diplomatic uniform was pressed and clean as always. She carried the same simple notebook she had brought to every session, though careful observers might have noticed it contained no more pages of notes than it had on the first day. She took her usual seat in the back row with the same fluid, economical movements. Once seated, she achieved her characteristic state of alert stillness. Her dark eyes tracked the movement of other students and faculty, but her expression remained neutral and unreadable. June arrived exactly 60 seconds later, but today he looked even worse than he had the day before. His hair was disheveled and his clothes wrinkled, suggesting he had slept poorly or perhaps not at all. The dark circles under his eyes had deepened to almost bruise-like shadows. His hand shook visibly as he set down his bag and fumbled with his materials. Unlike previous days, June did not sit in his usual seat 3 positions away from Kira. Instead, he chose a spot near the middle of the room, placing himself among a cluster of Kepler natives whose forearms and busy note-taking might provide some camouflage. He avoided looking in Kira's direction entirely. The additional students and faculty had filled most of the available seating. Representatives from species that had not been in the original class were now present. 2 members of the crystalline shard people sat in reinforced chairs designed to support their silicon-based forms. A delegation of 3 hive mind drones maintained perfect synchronization as they prepared their shared recording systems. Most notably, Ambassador Fergol from the Alterian Council had taken a seat in the front row. His presence meant that today's session had attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic government. The Alterian Council oversaw diplomatic relations between dozens of worlds, and their interest in human threat assessment carried significant political implications. Professor Veltar entered the classroom with his usual precise timing, but today his crystal body showed unusual color patterns. Instead of his normal calm blues and greens, streaks of deep purple ran through his translucent form. Purple indicated heightened concern among his species, bordering on genuine alarm. He moved to his position at the front of the room and activated the holographic display system. The familiar 3-dimensional images materialized in the classroom center, but today's content was different from the previous sessions. Instead of general information about human behavior, the display showed specific tactical scenarios. "Welcome to our 3rd session," Professor Veltar began, his melodious voice carrying subtle harmonics that conveyed serious intent. "Today we will cover the most crucial aspect of human threat assessment: emergency protocols and survival strategies when confronted with hostile humans." A ripple of attention went through the enlarged audience. Even the faculty observers leaned forward slightly. This was the practical information they had all come to hear. The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional recreation of a space station corridor. 2 human figures materialized in the scene, moving with the careful coordination Professor Veltar had described in previous lectures. "Scenario 1, he announced. "You find yourself in an enclosed space with 2 humans who have revealed hostile intentions. Your survival depends entirely on your ability to recognize threat indicators and respond appropriately within seconds." The holographic humans began to demonstrate various behaviors. Their movements became more deliberate and predatory. Their positioning shifted to control access points and escape routes. Their facial expressions changed from neutral to calculating. "Notice the subtle signs," Professor Veltar explained, pointing to specific details in the hologram, the way they distribute themselves to maximize coverage of the space, the slight changes in posture that indicate preparation for violence. Most importantly, observe their breathing patterns. The display zoomed in to show the respiratory rhythms of the holographic humans. Even in this simulated form, the change was noticeable. Deeper, more controlled breathing that suggested enhanced oxygen intake in preparation for physical exertion. Vexhai raised his scaled arm. "Professor, what if the humans appear calm and non-threatening? How do we distinguish between genuine peaceful intent and tactical deception?" Professor Veltar's crystal body pulsed with brighter purple streaks. An excellent question that brings us to the most dangerous category of human threat: the patient predator. New images filled the holographic display. These showed humans in various social situations: diplomatic meetings, trade negotiations, academic conferences, even casual social gatherings. But now, knowing what to look for, the observers could see subtle signs of constant assessment and preparation. The most lethal humans are not the angry ones or the desperate ones, Professor Veltar continued. They are the ones who take time to study their environment and plan their actions. These humans can maintain perfect behavioral camouflage for extended periods while gathering intelligence and positioning themselves for optimal advantage. The display showed a time-lapse sequence of a human gradually integrating into an alien community. Over weeks and months, the human built relationships, learned customs, gained trust, and slowly moved into positions of greater access and influence. This type of human can remain undetected until the moment they choose to act, Professor Veltar explained. By the time their true intentions become apparent, they have already achieved tactical superiority through knowledge, positioning, and psychological manipulation. A collective unease settled over the classroom. Many of the students began looking around nervously, as if suddenly wondering whether any of their classmates might be conducting similar long-term deceptions. Mordell, the stone-skinned student, raised his rocky hand. How do we identify these patient predators before they act? Professor Veltar's crystal body now showed deep red streaks mixed with the purple, indicating elevated alarm. That is the challenge. By definition, a successful patient predator is one who cannot be identified until after they have acted. However, there are some behavioral patterns we can discuss. The holographic display changed to show detailed psychological profiles. Brain scans, behavioral analysis charts, and statistical data filled the three-dimensional space. Patient-predator humans often display several characteristics, Professor Veltar said. They ask few questions but retain all information they receive. They adapt their behavior to match social expectations with unusual precision. They show remarkable emotional control under stress. Most significantly, they demonstrate an almost supernatural awareness of their environment and the people in it. Several students were now taking furious notes. The faculty observers had increased their recording activities. Ambassador Fairgoal from the Altarian Council was speaking quietly into a communication device, presumably reporting back to his government. June had gone completely pale. His breathing had become shallow and rapid. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the regulated classroom temperature. His hands gripped his stylus so tightly that his knuckles were white. He kept glancing toward the exits as if calculating distances and obstacles. In contrast, Kira remained perfectly composed. She sat with the same relaxed alertness she had maintained throughout all 3 sessions. Her breathing was steady, her posture unchanged, her expression neutral. The only difference was that she had stopped taking notes entirely. Her notebook lay closed on her desk, her pen resting beside it. The final element we must discuss, Professor Veltar announced, is the human capacity for instantaneous transition from peaceful to violent behavior. New footage appeared in the holographic display. Security cameras had captured moments when humans shifted from normal social interaction to combat effectiveness in seconds. The transformation was startling in its completeness and speed. Humans can maintain perfect camouflage right up until the moment they decide to act, Professor Veltar explained. When that transition occurs, they become entirely different beings. All pretense drops away and their full tactical capability becomes apparent. The footage showed humans moving with sudden predatory grace, their previous social awkwardness replaced by fluid, purposeful motion. Their facial expressions changed from friendly or neutral to focused and determined. Most unsettling of all, their eyes became cold and calculating, as if they were no longer seeing other beings as individuals, but as tactical problems to be solved. This brings us to today's practical exercise, Professor Veltar announced. His crystal body was now pulsing with steady red and purple patterns indicating maximum concern. The silence in the classroom stretched like a held breath. Every optical organ, sensor array, and compound eye in the room focused on Kira with the intensity of hunting predators watching prey. The weight of their collective attention should have been crushing, but Kira seemed completely unaffected by it. She rose from her seat with fluid grace that had not been apparent in her previous movements. Every motion was economical and precise, like a dancer or perhaps something more dangerous. Her gray diplomatic uniform, which had seemed unremarkable for 3 days, now appeared almost like camouflage designed to help her blend into any environment. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. The quiet, unremarkable exchange student was gone. In her place stood someone who radiated contained competence and controlled danger. She had not changed her appearance in any obvious way, yet she seemed like an entirely different person. Professor Veltar's crystal body continued flashing warning patterns of red and purple. The harmonics in his voice carried undertones of barely controlled panic as he managed to speak. "Yes, Miss Kira. You have something to contribute to our discussion?" Kira's dark eyes swept the classroom with the methodical precision of someone conducting a tactical assessment. She looked at each cluster of students, noting their positions and reactions. She glanced at the faculty observers, taking in their recording equipment and communication devices. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Ambassador Fergol, acknowledging his political importance with a slight nod. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and measured, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who was completely comfortable with the situation. "Professor, your analysis of human threat patterns has been quite thorough, but you have missed the most dangerous category." A ripple of movement went through the classroom as beings shifted in their seats. Several students reached for emergency communication devices. 2 of the shard people began harmonizing at frequencies that indicated they were preparing defensive crystalline barriers. June had stopped trembling and now sat perfectly still, staring at Kira with an expression of fascinated horror. His breathing had returned to normal, but his face showed the pale resignation of someone who had finally understood something they had been trying to deny. "Please," Professor Veltar said, his voice carefully modulated to hide his fear, "enlighten us about this category we have missed." Kira began walking slowly toward the front of the classroom. Her movement was predatory in the most literal sense, the way an apex predator moves when it knows it controls the situation completely. Every step was placed with careful consideration. Her hands remained visible and relaxed at her sides, but somehow this only made her appear more dangerous rather than less. "You have discussed the angry humans, the desperate humans, and the patient humans," Kira said as she moved between the rows of seats. Students leaned away from her as she passed, but she paid them no attention. "But you have not mentioned the educational humans." "Educational humans," Professor Veltar repeated, his crystal body now pulsing with rapid flashes of purple and orange. Kira paused beside the desk of one of the Kepler natives. The 4-armed being froze completely, all of its manipulator appendages suspended in mid-motion over its note-taking equipment. Kira looked down at the notes with mild interest, as if curious about how her words were being recorded. "Yes," she continued conversationally, "the humans who attend classes specifically designed to teach other species how to recognize human threats. They sit quietly and listen while instructors explain human psychology, human tactics, and human weaknesses. They take careful note of what other species consider to be our most dangerous characteristics." The implications of her words hit the classroom like a physical force. Several beings made sounds of alarm in their native languages. Ambassador Fergol was speaking rapidly into his communication device, presumably calling for security reinforcements. Kira reached the front of the classroom and turned to face the assembled beings. Behind her, Professor Veltar had backed away until he was pressed against the wall, his crystal body now showing solid red panic indicators. "Such a human would be extremely valuable to Earth intelligence services," Kira observed. "They would learn exactly how other species perceive human threats. They would discover which human behaviors cause the most fear and concern. Most importantly, they would understand which countermeasures other species have developed to contain human activities." She moved to Professor Veltar's desk and picked up one of the ceremonial artifacts displayed there, a crystalline data storage device from the Shard people's homeworld. She held it up to the light, examining its internal structure with apparent genuine interest. "For instance, I now know that the Shard people believe they can contain human aggression using harmonic resonance fields. The Kepler natives think their 4-armed advantage gives them superior combat capability. The Zephyrians assume their ability to become temporarily incorporeal makes them immune to human violence." As she spoke, representatives of each mentioned species showed visible signs of distress. The Shard people's harmonic frequencies shifted to defensive patterns. The Kepler natives drew their extra arms closer to their bodies. The Zephyrians' gaseous forms flickered as they prepared to phase out of normal space. Kira carefully placed the crystalline artifact back exactly where she had found it. The precision of the movement was somehow more unsettling than if she had handled it carelessly. Such intelligence would be incredibly valuable for future diplomatic negotiations, she continued. Earth would know exactly which species consider humans to be their primary threat. We would understand which worlds have developed specific anti-human military doctrines. We would be aware of which governments have contingency plans for containing human expansion. The classroom had become a tableau of barely controlled panic. Students clutched their emergency communicators. Faculty observers were backing toward the exits. Even Ambassador Fairgoal had risen from his seat and was edging toward the door, while continuing his urgent communications. June remained seated, but now he was watching Kira with an expression that combined admiration, terror, and something that might have been pride. When she glanced in his direction, he gave her the smallest possible nod, as if acknowledging a performance well executed. But perhaps most valuable of all, Kira said, turning back to address the entire room, would be the opportunity to demonstrate something that your threat assessment curriculum has completely overlooked. Professor Veltar's voice came out as barely more than a whisper, his usual musical harmonics replaced by discordant frequencies of pure fear. And what would that be? Kira's expression shifted subtly. The controlled predatory confidence remained, but something else appeared alongside it. Her eyes softened slightly, and the corners of her mouth moved in what might have been the beginning of a genuine smile. The most important thing about humans, she said, her voice becoming warmer and more gentle, is not our capacity for violence or our tactical intelligence or our adaptability. The most important thing about humans is our capacity for choice. The shift in her tone was so unexpected that several beings who had been preparing to flee actually stopped and turned back toward her. The change was dramatic. One moment she had been radiating controlled menace, and the next she seemed almost friendly. Every human you encounter has the ability to be your greatest enemy or your closest ally, Kira continued, her voice now carrying the warm tones of a teacher, rather than the cold precision of a predator. We make that choice fresh every single day in every single interaction. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many beings as possible. Where before her gaze had been calculating and threatening, now it seemed open and genuinely interested in connecting with others. I could have used the intelligence I have gathered here to help Earth develop countermeasures against your species, she said. I know your weaknesses now. I understand your fears. I am aware of your defensive capabilities and their limitations. The silence in the room was different now, less terrified and more attentive, as if the assembled beings were beginning to realize that this conversation might not end the way they had expected. But instead, Kira continued, I am choosing to use this information to help you understand something that your curriculum completely missed. Something that might be the most important lesson about humanity that any of you could learn, Professor. Feltar's crystal body had stopped flashing panic indicators and was now showing the deep blue of intense concentration, mixed with profound confusion. Which is? Kira's smile became genuine and reached her eyes for the first time since she had entered the classroom 3 days earlier. Which is that despite everything you have learned about human dangerousness, despite all the evidence of our capacity for violence and deception, despite your entirely rational fear of what we could do to you, she paused, letting the tension build one more time. We would much rather be your friends. The classroom erupted in a chaos of overlapping conversations as beings tried to process this unexpected turn. Some seemed relieved, others remained suspicious, and many appeared simply confused by the rapid emotional shifts they had just witnessed. Through it all, June sat quietly in his seat, no longer pale or trembling. The chaos of overlapping conversations gradually settled as beings throughout the classroom tried to process what they had just witnessed. Kira remained standing at the front of the room, but her posture had shifted again. The predatory grace was still there, but now it seemed more like the controlled movement of a skilled performer who had just completed a complex routine. Professor. Beltar slowly moved away from the wall where he had pressed himself during the height of his panic. His crystal body was cycling through rapid color changes as his emotional state struggled to find equilibrium. Blue concentration mixed with purple concern, orange curiosity, and lingering traces of red alarm. "Miss Kira," he said, his voice still carrying discordant harmonics, "are you saying that this entire demonstration was intended as an educational exercise?" Kira nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Yes and no, Professor. The demonstration was educational, but everything I told you was also completely accurate. I am exactly what you described as the most dangerous type of human threat." The brief sense of relief that had begun to settle over some of the students vanished immediately. Several beings who had started to relax tensed up again. Ambassador Fergol, who had put away his communication device, immediately pulled it out and resumed his urgent conversations with security. "Let me be very clear about what has happened here," Kira continued, moving back toward the center of the classroom. "For the past 3 days I have been conducting exactly the kind of intelligence-gathering operation that Professor Veltar warned you about." She walked slowly between the rows of seats, and once again students leaned away from her as she passed. But now her movement seemed less threatening and more like that of a teacher making sure all students could hear her. "Clearly, I have memorized the seating arrangements and learned which species prefer to sit near exits," she said, glancing toward a cluster of void walkers who had indeed positioned themselves near the primary door. "I have observed your individual behavioral patterns and identified which of you are natural leaders and which are followers." The void walkers exchanged glances using their specialized optical organs, confirming her assessment was accurate. "I have noted which species rely on technology for communication versus those who use biological methods," Kira continued. "I have identified the locations of emergency communication devices, security sensors, and structural weak points in this classroom." As she spoke, she gestured casually toward various points around the room. Her accuracy was unsettling. She pointed to hidden security cameras that most students had never noticed, emergency communication panels that were designed to blend into the walls, and structural support beams that would indeed be critical in case of damage. "I have also been conducting psychological assessment of key individuals," she added, her gaze settling on Professor Veltar. "I know exactly which types of behavior cause you the most stress, Professor. I understand how your species responds to perceived threats. I am aware of the specific frequencies that trigger your panic responses." Professor Veltar's crystal body flickered with embarrassment as well as concern. Her analysis was clearly accurate, which made her previous demonstration even more impressive and disturbing. "Most importantly," Kira continued, "I have learned something that no amount of remote observation or intelligence reports could have provided. I know how you think about humans when you believe we cannot hear you." She paused near Jun's desk. He looked up at her with an expression that was no longer fearful but rather admiring. The transformation in his demeanor was as dramatic as the change in Kira herself. "This kind of information would normally be sent back to Earth through encrypted channels," Kira said. "It would be analyzed by military strategists and diplomatic specialists. It would be used to develop countermeasures against your defensive capabilities and to identify weaknesses in your psychological profiles." The classroom had fallen completely silent again. Every being present was hanging on her words, trying to determine whether they were still in danger or if this was truly just an elaborate lesson. "But instead of sending this intelligence to Earth," Kira continued, "I am sharing it with you directly, because the most important thing I learned during these 3 days is not your tactical vulnerabilities or psychological weaknesses." She moved back to the front of the classroom and turned to face the assembled beings. Her expression was now completely open and honest, showing no trace of the predatory calculation she had displayed earlier. "The most important thing I learned is that you are genuinely afraid of us," she said simply, not just cautious or concerned, but truly, deeply frightened by the possibility of human aggression. Professor Veltar's colors shifted to deeper blues as he processed this statement. "And this surprises you?" "Yes, it does," Kira replied. "Because from the human perspective, we have been trying very hard to be good neighbors in this galaxy. We follow diplomatic protocols. We respect territorial boundaries. We participate in trade agreements and cultural exchanges. We have never initiated aggressive action against any species that had not already attacked us first." She gestured toward the holographic display system, which still showed frozen images from Professor Veltar's previous lessons about human violence and tactical capabilities. But I now understand that our efforts to be peaceful have not been sufficient to overcome your fear of our potential for violence, she continued. You see our capabilities and you assume we will inevitably use them against you. You interpret our adaptability as evidence that we are planning infiltration. You view our emotional range as proof that we are unstable and dangerous. Ambassador Fergol stood up from his seat in the front row. Are you suggesting that human intentions are entirely peaceful? Your species has a documented history of internal conflicts. Kira nodded thoughtfully. You are absolutely correct, Ambassador. Humans do fight among ourselves, often for reasons that other species find incomprehensible. But there is something crucial that your threat assessment curriculum has overlooked. Which is? Professor Veltar asked, his crystal body now showing steady blue concentration. We fight each other precisely because we are the same species, Kira explained. Human conflicts arise from competition for resources, ideological differences, and territorial disputes between groups that have identical capabilities and similar goals. She moved to Professor Veltar's desk and activated the holographic display system herself. New images appeared showing human diplomatic missions, trade negotiations, and collaborative scientific projects with alien species. Our relationship with alien species is fundamentally different, she continued. We do not compete with you for the same resources because our biological needs are different. We do not have ideological conflicts with you because your cultures evolved independently from ours. We do not have territorial disputes with you because the galaxy is vast enough for all of us. The holographic displays showed detailed statistics about human-alien interactions, trade agreements, joint scientific projects, successful diplomatic resolutions of conflicts, and collaborative exploration missions far outnumbered any instances of human-alien violence. The mathematics are clear, Kira said. Humans have peaceful, productive relationships with alien species at a rate of over 97%. The few instances of human-alien conflict have invariably occurred when other species initiated hostilities first. Mordell, the stone-skinned student, raised his rocky hand. But surely human nature makes future conflicts inevitable. Kira smiled at him, and this time her expression carried genuine warmth and amusement. That brings us back to the concept of choice that I mentioned earlier. Yes, humans have the capacity for violence. Yes, we can be dangerous when threatened. Yes, we are adaptable and strategic in ways that can be unsettling. But here is what your threat assessment curriculum cannot teach you, she continued. Every human you meet makes a conscious decision about how to interact with alien species. We are not driven by instinct or programmed responses. We choose our behavior based on how we are treated and what we hope to accomplish. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many beings as possible. I chose to demonstrate human capabilities today not to threaten you, but to show you that even when we possess tactical advantages, even when we have intelligence about your vulnerabilities, even when we could potentially cause harm, we consistently choose cooperation over conflict. June finally stood up from his seat and walked toward the front of the classroom. The other students watched him nervously, still not entirely sure whether either of the humans present could be trusted. She is right, he said in accented but clear galactic standard. I have been terrified for 3 days because I thought she might actually be the kind of human this class warned us about. But watching her now, I understand what she was really doing. He stopped beside Kira and turned to face the classroom. She was showing you that even the most dangerous human, the one with perfect knowledge and tactical superiority, still chooses to be your friend rather than your enemy. Kira nodded approvingly. June understands something that your curriculum missed entirely. Human dangerousness is not the most important thing about us. Human choice is. The atmosphere in the classroom had transformed completely, from the tense fear of earlier moments to something approaching genuine curiosity and cautious optimism. Beings who had been preparing to flee were now leaning forward in their seats, eager to hear more. Even the faculty observers had relaxed their defensive postures and were taking notes. Again, Ambassador Fergol stood and walked toward the front of the classroom where Kira and June waited beside Professor Veltar's desk. His movement was deliberate and formal, suggesting he was about to make some kind of official statement. Miss Kira, he said in the precise tones used for diplomatic communications, I believe I speak for many in this room when I say that your demonstration has been both educational and deeply unsettling. You have proven that a human agent could indeed infiltrate our institutions and gather significant intelligence without detection. Kira nodded seriously. That was never in question, Ambassador. Human infiltration capabilities are exactly as advanced as Professor Veltar described in his lectures. However, the ambassador continued, you have also demonstrated something that our intelligence services had not considered. You have shown that possessing such capabilities does not necessarily mean humans intend to use them maliciously. That is correct, Kira agreed. Capability does not equal intent. This is perhaps the most important distinction for other species to understand about humans. Professor Veltar had been listening to this exchange while his crystal body gradually shifted through the spectrum toward calmer colors. Now he stepped forward to rejoin the conversation. Miss Kira, I must ask you directly, he said, his voice carrying its normal musical harmonics for the first time since she had raised her hand. Are you actually an intelligence operative? Is your presence here part of some larger Earth government operation? Kira exchanged a quick glance with June, and something passed between them that might have been amusement or shared understanding. I am exactly who I claim to be, she replied. I am an exchange student with the Terran Diplomatic Corps. My presence here is part of a cultural and educational exchange program designed to promote better understanding between humans and other species, but, she added with a slight smile, the Diplomatic Corps does recruit from individuals with diverse skill sets. My previous experience before joining the Corps included activities that some might consider relevant to intelligence work. This admission caused another ripple of nervous movement through the classroom, but Kira held up her hand to forestall any panic. The point is not what I used to do, she continued. The point is what I choose to do now. I could have used my skills to gather intelligence for Earth's military advantage. Instead, I chose to use them to teach you something about human nature that your traditional threat assessments could never reveal. June stepped forward to address the classroom. I think I understand now why Kira was chosen for this assignment. She represents something important about humanity that we need other species to understand. Which is? Asked Vex High, the blue-scaled student who had asked so many questions during previous sessions. That our most dangerous individuals often choose to be our most peaceful ones, June replied. Kira could probably neutralize half the beings in this room if she decided you were enemies, but she would much rather spend her time making friends and building relationships. Kira nodded approvingly at his analysis. June has identified the paradox that makes humans confusing to other species. Our capacity for violence and our preference for peace exist simultaneously in the same individuals. She moved back to the holographic display system and activated new images showing various human communities throughout the galaxy. These are human settlements on 47 different worlds, she explained. In every case, the initial human colonists included individuals with military training, intelligence backgrounds, or other skills that could be considered threatening. But in every case, these same individuals chose to focus their talents on building peaceful, productive communities. The images showed humans working alongside alien species in agricultural projects, scientific research, artistic endeavors, and commercial enterprises. Former soldiers had become teachers, ex-intelligence operatives had become diplomats, combat specialists had become emergency rescue workers. This is what humans do when we are not threatened, Kira continued. We turn our dangerous capabilities toward constructive purposes. We use our strategic thinking to solve problems rather than create them. We apply our adaptability to building bridges between cultures rather than tearing them down. Ambassador Fergol was taking careful notes on a diplomatic recording device. Are you saying that the best way to ensure peaceful human behavior is to create environments where humans feel safe and welcome? I am saying that human behavior is largely contextual, Kira replied. Put humans in a threatening environment and we will respond to threats. Put us in a cooperative environment and we will work toward shared goals. Professor Veltar's crystal body had now returned to the calm blue and green patterns he had shown at the beginning of the semester. This suggests that our entire approach to human threat assessment may be counterproductive. How so? Asked Dr. Catherine from the Military Strategy Department, speaking for the first time since the session had begun. By teaching other species to fear humans and prepare for human aggression, Professor Veltar explained, we may be creating the very threatening environment that encourages hostile human responses. Kira smiled at him with genuine appreciation. Professor, you have just demonstrated the kind of insight that makes education so much more valuable than intelligence gathering. She turned to address the entire classroom. This is why I chose to reveal my capabilities and methods to you directly, rather than simply completing my assignment and leaving. Because the most important lesson about humanity cannot be learned by studying us from a distance. What lesson is that? Asked Mordell. That we want to be understood rather than feared, Kira replied simply. Every human in the galaxy would rather have alien friends than alien enemies. Every human community would rather trade than fight. Every human leader would rather negotiate than conquer. But we will only continue to choose peace if we believe that peace is possible, June added. If other species treat us as inevitable enemies, some humans may eventually decide to fulfill those expectations. The implications of this statement settled over the classroom like a weight. The assembled beings began to understand that their own attitudes toward humans might partially determine future human behavior. Ambassador Fergol closed his recording device and looked directly at Kira. What would you recommend as the optimal approach for species that are concerned about human expansion and influence? Kira considered the question carefully before responding. Engagement rather than isolation. Cooperation rather than competition. Honest communication rather than fearful speculation. She gestured toward the diverse collection of beings in the classroom. Every species represented here has unique capabilities and perspectives that humans find fascinating rather than threatening. The Shard people's crystalline technology could revolutionize human computing systems. The Void Walker's ability to survive in space could transform human exploration capabilities. The Zephyrian's energy manipulation could solve human power generation problems. Humans do not want to conquer or replace other species, she continued. We want to learn from you. We want to work with you. We want to build something better together than any of us could create alone. Professor Veltar activated his own recording equipment and began speaking in the formal tones used for official academic announcements based on today's revelations and discussions, he said. I am recommending immediate revision of this course curriculum. The focus will shift from threat assessment to relationship building. Instead of identifying and neutralizing human threats, the course will be renamed Understanding and Cooperating with Human Cultures. A murmur of approval went through the classroom. Several students were already making notes about the implications of this change for their own academic studies and career plans. Furthermore, Professor Veltar continued, I am inviting Ms. Kira to serve as a guest lecturer for the remainder of the semester. Her unique perspective and demonstrated expertise make her invaluable for helping us understand practical applications of human-alien cooperation. Kira bowed slightly in acceptance. I would be honored to contribute to the educational mission of the Institute. June raised his hand tentatively. Professor, does this mean that humans will be welcome in future xenobiology courses without being treated as potential threats? Professor Veltar's crystal body flashed with what might have been embarrassment. Mr. June, I apologize for any discomfort you experienced during our previous sessions. Your presence and reactions provided valuable data about human responses to perceived hostility, but I should have been more sensitive to your emotional well-being. Actually, June replied with a grin, I think my reactions were exactly what Kira needed to make her point. Someone had to demonstrate normal human behavior under stress so she could contrast it with her own capabilities. Kira laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. June figured out what I was doing on the second day. He has been playing his role perfectly ever since.